You're watching Channel 4 and sign on.
Hello and welcome again to Newswatch. In today's programme, the first deaf woman to become a priest of the Church of England. And the women who feel that we're still a long way from an equal share in society.
But first, last month saw one of the most important events, not only of the year, but of the decade, and even of the 20th century. The general election in South Africa ended 300 years of white domination of a country where the vast majority of the people are black. Last year, Newswatch reported on the struggle of South African blacks for freedom and against the system of racial segregation known as apartheid. April brought the fulfillment of their struggle, a general election in which all races could take part and which resulted in a victory for the African National Congress and their president, Nelson Mandela.
The moment Nelson Mandela has fought for decades. 27 years in prison, a lifetime of oppression. Today, the vote that makes the sacrifice worthwhile.
This is, for all South Africans, an unforgettable occasion. It is the realization of hopes and dreams that we have cherished over decades.
And up with the sun this morning, millions of township blacks queuing to have their say in this country for the first time, relishing the chance to vote for change.
Even my parents who have passed away have been wishing to see this one. They couldn't. But today I have voted for them.
There are people who died for this. The most people who fought for this, they are not here. They couldn't take us to the promised land. But now here we are.
And ANC President Nelson Mandela, in prison 5 years ago, will now be president of his country. So at the first opportunity, South Africa's blacks have returned a huge majority of black members of parliament, as you'd expect. But not all majorities behave in the same way. Tessa.
It's 76 years since women in the UK were given the right to vote. At that time, in 1918, it was given only to women who'd reached the sensible age of 30. It was 1928 before women could vote at the same age as men, 21. Since 1970, the voting age has been 18. Women are over half the population, but in all those years there's never been anything but a tiny minority of women members of Parliament. And it was only 15 years ago, this very week, in 1979, that we had the first woman Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. The women who struggled to win the vote, called the suffragettes, the word suffrage means the right to vote, would have been disappointed at the slow progress. Many of them were arrested and sent to prison for demonstrating. In jail they went on hunger strike and were often brutally force-fed through tubes that were pushed down their nostrils and throats. So when a group of women in 1994 wanted to make their protest at the continuing inequality of women, they decided to start from the burial place of one suffragette who died in the cause. All she wanted to do was to pin a suffragette flag on the racehorse of King Edward VII. Emily Wilding Davison died when she ran in front of the King's horse during the Derby in 1913. She became a martyr of the suffragette movement, which won the right to vote for women. Last month, 81 years later, a group of women marched from her grave here in Northumberland 300 miles to Parliament. Again, they said, to demand rights for women.
The 300-mile walk was organised by a Newcastle-based group called Women on the March. Its members want improved pay and health care for women and better protection against domestic violence. But the march also aims to celebrate the achievements of the suffragette movement. So, after leaving Morpeth Town Centre, they made their way to the burial place of Emily Wilding Davison, who was at the forefront of the fight for votes for women 76 years ago. Joining the first stage of the march from Morpeth to Newcastle was Anne Scargill, the wife of the miners' leader, Arthur Scargill.
My message to women today is don't give in, keep on fighting, take inspiration from Emily Davison. She fought so strongly about it, she was prepared to give her life. And we are going to carry on, and you know what they say, women united will never be defeated.
Nearly 3 weeks and over 300 miles later, the marchers finally made it to London. Along the way, they had been joined by different women's groups, anxious to lend their support. For the 5 women who'd completed the entire journey from Morpeth, it was their own way of paying tribute to the heroics of early suffragette leaders like Emily Wilding Davison.
All the way down, that's what we've been pushing, what they went through, the struggles they have, and that we've got to continue and struggle till we win.
As they walked towards the House of Commons, armed with an ambitious and comprehensive list of demands, including equal pay, increased maternity pay, state-funded childcare, and an end to all violence against women, the organisers felt that the march had made a difference.
We've now got an amazing network of women right up and down the country, of people who've played a part in this, not just marching, but in organising and laying on events in different towns and cities. And that is a solid foundation on which we can build the struggles that we're going to have to undertake in the future.
Later, we talked to 2 of the women from the march about their aims. We also asked 2 women MPs for their views. Audrey Wise for Labour, not surprisingly, was all in favour of the march. And Emma Nicholson, Conservative, perhaps less predictably, was also supportive.
We're trying to celebrate basically the history of the struggle of women for the vote, which basically lasted for about 50 years, where there was lots and lots of women who really sacrificed huge parts of their lives, went through terrible things like force feeding, and some of them ultimately paid the price with their lives, in order that we women now can have an equal vote with men. We wanted to celebrate the history of all of that, and link the kind of struggles and the kind of things women had to do then with the kind of struggles that we have to undertake now in order to get equality for women and to make gains for everyone in the country.
Equal opportunities for all of the nation are rightly on the agenda. We have to take every care as women, however, that we fight our cause, we fight our corner. Why are there so few women in various different sections of the workplace? Maybe we haven't tried hard enough to get there. The truth is that it's a long, tough fight, because men are very tough creatures. To give up power is very difficult for them. And somehow, maybe because women bear the children, nurture the children, care for them and bring them up, a woman's life has been so devoted to childcare and production of a family that in the past women haven't had equal rights.
Looking at the demands that were put forward, I'd like to see more childcare provision. I'd like more childcare, not just in the schools and nurseries, I'd like to see it in the workplace as well. And if it's not childcare, at least a share, well, to pay towards childcare in the home. And I'd hope that they'll achieve equal opportunities and equal rights.
You still come across women who say things like, I'm not going to vote, politics doesn't concern me, or I don't understand politics. And the demands on this list, all political, but mind, they concern women's everyday lives. And so, as saying you want equal pay, there's a 21% pay gap between men and women. Well, that's political. And we want better child benefits. We want better pensions. Most pensioners, you know, are women. Pensions is a big issue for women, although it's not regarded as a women's issue. And so voting is the most elementary thing to do.
Well, I mean, it's clear, I mean, if you just look at Parliament, for example, that we don't have the number of women MPs as we have the numbers of men MPs in Parliament. And that is really replicated in every area of life. You know, if you look at local councils, if you look at women's representation in all the sort of leading bodies of the country, you will not see the number of women there as you see men. And obviously that's something that's got to be rectified. After all, women are 52% of the population, and we're not going to take second best any longer, basically.
The fact is that women now are much more likely to feel that they are people in their own right. They have got rights to their own independence in a much greater degree. Governments have to pay some attention to them. You don't get silly discussions about have they got enough intelligence to vote. So yes, there's been big advances, but not enough.
Women ourselves sometimes we feel as if we shouldn't go up to the high, that we haven't got the confidence and we maybe can't do that. But I think once you get there, you realise you can do it as equal as anyone else. But you just need to get the chance to do that.
There are not enough women in the House of Commons to make the critical mass which would make us be taken fully seriously as we rightly deserve. So, more women in the House of Commons is badly needed, badly, badly needed, and the women of Northumberland should try very hard indeed to get some more women on the selection lists.
Yes, I'll agree. You have to work in Parliament, but if you haven't got the grassroots, if you haven't got women in the grassroots that will come up, I don't think Parliament can help you. I think you need the grassroots, you need the community, you need everybody in the community working together. Get equal opportunities, get the space in your own community, get your education courses, get your childcare, and then work up the top, and then change Parliament.
The legacy of Emily Wilding Davison. It took hundreds of years to get women into Parliament. In part 2, we look at the struggle that's taken 2,000 years for women to become priests. Join us after the break. deaf woman priest conducting a sign language choir. This past year has seen a major step forward for women in the Church of England. For 2,000 years in the older Christian churches, it's been the dogma that women couldn't become priests. In particular, that they could not perform the service of the Eucharist, in which bread and wine are said to become the flesh and blood of Christ. But in the 20th century, more and more people in the Church of England have felt that this implied inferiority of women was out of date. Once again, a vote was required to change the situation. A vote of the Church of England Synod, a kind of parliament of the Church. After many arguments and failed attempts, the vote for the ordination of women as priests was finally passed by the Synod in October 1992.
Guide, O God, the Church of England, through this time of decision concerning the ordination of women to the priesthood.
A call for divine guidance, and what followed was a reasoned debate, but one that spelt out the misgivings of those who felt the ordination of women would be a mistake.
I do not believe that the Church of England, and in particular this synod, has reached the point where it can be sure that this is the will of God.
Mistrust, marginalization, and mayhem. And this is the legislation, the scenario we are being invited to approve this morning.
But against that, a rising tide of expectancy, a clear call for change.
I ask the Synod to take a step forward into the future, God's future, confident that he will lead us into his truth. I ask the Synod to vote firmly, clearly, and confidently for this legislation.
Outside the Synod, an anxious vigil, they stood in the cold, following the debate, waiting to see which side would carry the day. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who'd warned that the Church would lose its credibility if it voted against, called for a moment's reflection.
We are pupils in the school of his teaching. Guide us into his truth.
Then the delegates of this Parliament of the Church went to the division lobbies. It was clear the bishops and the clergy would be in favour. It all rested on the judgment of the lay members.
House of Laity 169, ayes, 82 noes. The motion, having received a 2/3 majority in each of the three houses of the Synod, is carried.
2 votes had clinched it, history made. Dr. Carey had asked for silence, no cheers, but profound joy and relief that women were at last to be received into the priesthood, the biggest change since the Reformation. No inhibitions outside, for these at least, a time for celebration.
Wonderful. Thank you. A wonderful day for women. Yes. An excellent, powerful day for women. Oh, absolutely ecstatic. Yes. Well, it means a new road ahead, and I think it's a break for the Church.
It wasn't until March this year that the first women priests were finally ordained. 1,000 more women are hoping to enter the priesthood over the next year. But there's been a strong reaction. Many members of the Church of England have become Roman Catholics. The Catholic Church stands by the all-male priesthood. And just last month, the Anglican Church in Wales voted against women priests. However, in the Church of England, the door is now open. And amazingly, one of the very first women to pass through is deaf. She's Vera Hunt, who's worked closely with the Royal Association in aid of deaf people. On Saturday, the 16th of April, Vera was ordained as a priest at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. A few days later, Tessa went to see her at St. Paul's.
How did it feel when you were ordained?
Well, I felt humble, and at the same time I felt joy. 3 years ago I was ordained as a deacon here, but now, last Saturday, I was ordained as a priest. It was wonderful.
What was it like conducting your first service as a priest?
My first service, the Sunday after I was ordained as a priest, was in the RAD Church, St Saviour's at Shepherd's Bush. It was really lovely. There were over 170 deaf and hearing people there to join me in my first Holy Communion. It was beautiful.
To say that party of Christ, we were living a wonderful the costume, the one person.
God, you take away the sins of the world, mercy on us.
Why did you want to become a priest?
That's a difficult question. Why did I want to become a priest? I think God just called me and I answered his call.
Now, some people are opposed to the idea of women becoming priests. What do you feel about them?
I feel we should respect their views and hope that they in turn respect ours. And then we pray for each other, in unity through prayer.
What special significance is there for deaf women and deaf people in general in your becoming a priest?
First of all, I think, becoming a priest is important because it shows that God also calls deaf women, or a deaf person, to serve him more fully. He not only calls hearing people, he calls deaf people as well. Also, being a deaf priest, I can work and help the wider church to be aware that deaf people are just the same as them, part of the whole body of Christ, part of the whole church of Christ. That is important.
As the first deaf woman priest, what would you like to achieve?
I don't want to achieve anything, but just to achieve a place in the church for deaf people as a whole. I would want to achieve, perhaps, I would say for me, to serve God more fully. Now I can give the Holy Communion and give the blessing, so I feel I am fulfilling my ministry as well as working with deaf people.
Vera Hunt, priest of the Church of England. Her language may be different from that of Women on the March, but it seems equally positive in asserting the rights of women.
Next month, women and men all over Europe will be voting in the elections for the European Parliament. June also sees the 50th anniversary of D-Day. So what does Europe mean to most of us? To find out, watch Newswatch on June the 4th. Next week, Rachel Bastiker will be here with Deaf World and a look at the work of a deaf fashion designer in the African country of Guinea. She's a woman too. Join us for that.